It's 2012, and something big is about to happen at I/O, Google's annual product launch event. The presentation to a huge audience is suddenly interrupted.
So tell me now, who wants to see a demo of Glass? So we've been really excited to test it for a few months. The unit I actually really want to show you, I lent to a friend, and he's going to be here momentarily. And he's actually pretty close by. He's just about a mile overhead right now.
A giant blimp hovering in the sky directly above San Francisco's convention center is suddenly projected onto the screen. In the blimp are 4 people in wingsuits, parachutes on their back.
They have a few Glass units. If you guys can maybe afford to wait that couple minutes, maybe they'll bring them down.
Each of these daredevils are wearing a thin band across their brow line, almost but not quite like eyeglasses. On one arm of the band is a solid, rectangular, pencil-thin, clear plastic block, just barely obscuring their right eye. And as the audience looks up at the huge screen, they can see what the daredevils are seeing.
What do you guys think? Should they go for it? All right, let's do it. And they're off.
They jump, and what follows is a first-person perspective of their flight down towards the city.
And they're under canopy. Chutes are open. Woo-hoo.
Gliding in to land on top of the venue, a small velvet bag is passed to a team of rappellers who whiz over the edge of the roof and down. They're on the ground in moments. The bag is passed to the waiting hands of a team on BMX bikes who weave through an unsuspecting crowd until finally riding up on the stage and passing the bag into the hands of Sergey Brin, Google's co-founder. It was a spectacular launch for a new device, Google Glass, one of the earliest products in consumer wearable tech.
Oh my God. Great technology, great idea, ahead of its time.
When Glass launched, we didn't have smartwatches. Wearables belonged to niche areas of manufacturing and medicine, not out in the real world.
After watching all these failed interaction attempts, nothing had kind of broken free. And is this the moment that it could break free?
You might think you know the answer to that question, but I'd argue it's not quite as simple as you might assume. And so, just for now, I want to challenge you. Forget what you think you know about Google Glass, because there's more to the story than usually gets told. Welcome to the Moonshot Podcast. I'm your host and captain of Moonshots, Astro Teller. In this series, we go behind the scenes at X, Google's innovation factory, to meet the people working to solve some of the world's hardest problems with radical creativity and breakthrough technology. So let me take you behind the doors of our Moonshot Lab. I want to take us back through the early days of Glass, before the wingsuit jump, before we knew exactly what Glass was going to become, through to where we are today. Helping me are 2 luminaries in the world of design, both with hugely varied careers ranging from jewelry design to electronics. Like many before and after them, they didn't know quite what they were going to be getting themselves into when they joined X.
Then I thought to myself, I didn't move across the Atlantic to not take risks.
Isabel Olson is now a VP and head of industrial design for Google's home and wearables products.
I got a mysterious note that says your name came highly recommended from senior leadership. There's a role at Google X, but you have to sign these papers and we'll tell you what it's about.
Ivy Ross understands aesthetics. She was an artist, and the Smithsonian has some of her metalwork in its collection. She's now Chief Design Officer for Consumer Devices at Google.
I closed my eyes and I thought, why not? This is stepping into the unknown, which to me is the ultimate creative act.
X is fond of saying we start with a huge problem with the world. And I don't think that Glass was any exception to that. But unlike some of the things that we do, the problem might be less obvious at first. Why make something like Glass?
You know, the flash I got, and I'm a visual person, was this beautiful sequence of drawing of when man first was, on all fours, and then stood up, and we were starting to go back down by looking down on our phones. And glass would make us not look down, but be in the moment, look forward, and get all the information we need.
I love that you bring that up because it was literally one of the first things I did when I joined the team was to have this drawing made. Because I was interviewing a bunch of people working on the project to try to understand the why behind. And then it hit me as like we have evolved as humans to be able to stand up straight. And here we are in the beginning of this smartphone era, and we're just consumed by these devices. And the feeling I got from the team, what they wanted to achieve was to free us up again and to be humans.
I think we have our physical life and we have our digital life. And I always saw glass as giving us the opportunity to pull back together our physical experience of the world and our digital experience. So rather than having these very never the twain shall meet experiences, they could be part and parcel of the same thing. They would start to feather into each other. Isabel, what are some of your memories of the early fights, which now in retrospect, maybe it seems obvious what the answer was, but at the time, I remember the team went hammers and tongs, like literally, should it be a hat? Or should it go in both of your eyes or just one of your eyes?
I mean, I would say there were big ones and small ones. I would say one of the big ones was the whole debate about should it look like glasses or not. And I think there were definitely two camps. There was some people who felt strongly it has to look like glasses, and some people that felt it has to look like something totally new that nobody's ever seen before. And of course, as a designer and as a problem solver, I'm like, I'm going to offer both. So designing a system that could both be something very futuristic, like the first edition, as well as something that could be modularized into glasses. What a great opportunity to test both. And then on top of that, trying to create something that, you know, a lot of people would be willing to wear.
From an aesthetic
perspective. And that goes beyond even trend, like just physically, like what eyeglasses that fit you are very different from what fit me. And, you know, I would always mention to the team, like, and show them a picture of an eyeglasses store. And it's like, you go into an eyeglasses store and you see thousands of styles. And that is, you know, ultimately, we're not going to be able to get around that fact that a lot of people are going to need something to fit their style.
And so, instead of just debating it, the team set about prototyping at a fast pace.
Yeah, it was a really interesting process of, instead of all being in our heads and tinkering, the idea was how can we rapidly prototype experiences, especially with the product that has never truly existed before. It was so important for the team to really immerse ourselves in the opportunities and challenges and really experience it, because there's no way of simulating that.
And so we challenged ourselves to bring out a new internal prototype every month and have the team wear it themselves, try it out, use it, figure out what worked and what didn't.
These are some of the earliest glass prototypes. They're falling apart because at this point they're 14 years old. And that's what you do with prototypes. You break them so you can learn.
A lot of our earliest prototype development happens in the workshop and lab we call the design kitchen. Here's the DK's leader, Joe Sargent.
Everything started really with off-the-shelf safety glasses that we glued stuff onto and put compute in the backpack. Then we got to some custom form factors. So we're 3D printing custom frames at that point and starting to mount compute on with optics. I mean, there were thousands upon thousands of prototypes, testing everything from different components, fit, form.
In the early stages, every iteration was made to test or improve upon a specific function.
If you try to test everything with a single prototype at first, you go mad because if something goes wrong, you don't know what's wrong. Then you start merging in and taking these different prototypes where you're learning different components of the system. Then you start getting to like a system level prototype. So that's where we started getting to here. So this is, again, 3D printed glass frames and some compute that clearly was not going to be the final compute. It's huge. It's, you know, the size of a deck of cards and damn near as heavy, but you're starting to get the systems together. and learning about what that means and the challenges with that.
You keep on refining and refining, which for Isabel sometimes meant taking things into her own hands.
You know, I would get these kind of off the shelf components from smartphones, and smartphones are blocks, and humans are not blocks. You know, we're all organic and shapely, and to shape something towards a face, you kind of need the curves. And so I got this square component. I'm like, I can't work with this. This is going to look like a square cyborg thing on your face. And so I try to negotiate with the engineer, like, hey, can we just, make it a little smaller? Can we, shave some millimeters off here and there? And they were like, no, it's not going to work. And so I went to the sanding belt with this component and I sanded off the edge of it. And then I went back to him and I said, can you plug it in and see if it still works? And it did. And then I got the permission to build a custom camera component so we could curve around it and create something that was slightly less intense.
And then you get to the final, I'm going to still call it a prototype. Super light, is incredibly futuristic. It's incredibly svelte. It's incredibly light. It looks like a futuristic headband that you get information from, which is what it is.
And so, after a rapid period of development, we had a functioning model. It was super lightweight, all the computing squeezed into the right arm of the unit. A tiny prism display screen sat just above the eye line of the right eye to not disrupt your vision. You could take photos, shoot videos, and when linked to your phone, check your calendar, make calls, send messages, check the weather, and much more, and do it all hands-free. It was getting close to being something.
I will never forget, I got a phone call from Sebastian Thrun, and he said, we're going to go public with this prototype. And I was like, oh, crap. I thought I had more time. I thought we had more time to iterate and perfect and continue to drive it even further.
We might have thrown Isabel initially, but there was a method here. We'd seen how much the internal testing had pushed the project forward. And at some point, your learning slows down unless you get out of the lab and into the real world with real people.
We need to learn from the public because this is as much of a technology problem as it is a social experiment in a sense. So the decision at the time was to open this up to, I believe, 10,000 people, give them access to this prototype. And I call it a prototype and not a product intentionally because it was truly a prototype.
And so Google Glass launched, literally out of a blimp over San Francisco. But this wasn't the launch of a finished product. We called it the Explorer Program because we needed people to try it out and help us learn. We wanted to know what people would do with Glass. We knew that we couldn't just sit in our labs and guess how people would use it. So we made it available to hairdressers, firefighters, nurses, users beyond software developers, to come along with us on a journey to figure out what's next. How can this learning platform be used and understood by the public? Because here's the thing, it certainly hadn't been perfected yet. And getting out there was exciting because no one had done this before.
I still meet people today at dinner parties that when they hear where I work, they'll, with such excitement, say, I was an explorer. Yeah. And so that idea of engaging the public to a place where they feel like they're part of the creation of something was a super clever idea.
Right. It wasn't just kind of user research on steroids. It felt like this extended community was co-creating with us. It was very special.
We brought in Ivy to lead the Glass team and the next iteration of what Glass could become. She found Glass was incredibly comfortable to wear. It was lightweight and I think looked really cool and beautiful. But with the Explorer program in motion, we were still figuring out exactly who it was for and what they were going to do with it. Ivy and her team started experimenting with what we call use cases, i.e., when and where Glass might provide the most value.
I remember getting these incredible personal stories and pictures of parents in their playground being able to hands-free play with their kids and document it at the same time. We also, I remember from one of the explorers who was at Harvard, he sent me once a note. He had developed software and called them happy glasses for kids with Asperger's who cannot read the emotions of a parent. So this video he sent me that we were all in tears over it, the child without his quote unquote happy glasses, no expressions on his face because he couldn't relate to what was happening around the dinner table, puts the glasses on. It had facial recognition software. And it overamped the emotions. So the child would look at the mother's face, and in the child's glass would be a super cartoon version of a happy face. And so they were able to read, Mom's happy. And all of a sudden, the video, the family is laughing, they're interacting. And so some incredible use cases that we had never thought of, that you could call fringe, including doctors using it in surgery and operations and having their students see through their eyes. Not just sitting behind a one-way mirror and listening to the commentary, but being right in that heart with that doctor. Or people on the assembly line using it to be able to look at an airplane or a part and have the catalog of information of parts and never have to leave the assembly line and call their supervisor and have a part brought to them. So there appeared to be use cases that we hadn't thought of.
Oh, hundreds, I think.
Yeah, that were coming up in industry and things like this that were super exciting.
By early 2015, the Explorer program had provided a huge amount of information about how people wanted to use Glass and their experience of the device. Now, the Glass Explorer was a learning platform. It was designed for getting feedback and shaping the future of the device. However, in hindsight, it's clear that some of the marketing we did around Glass encouraged people to see it less as a prototype and more as a finished product. And so it got hyped, which ultimately led to disappointment. But still, lots of people loved Glass, myself included, and this experimental phase did help us learn what wasn't working so well. Sometimes it was the hardware, battery life, storage, weight, overheating, all fixable things that you'd expect to be highlighted with a limited release prototype. Less easily fixable was the social backlash. Some of this was about privacy, and some of it was more about the public perception of what Glass represented, what it said about the person wearing it. What it showed us most clearly was that the world wasn't quite ready for something like Glass as a consumer product.
I've been part of a lot of innovation labs. There is a dance you have to play because people don't always know what they want.
For sure.
So it's a push-pull. You have to lead them. But in retrospect, I think you could look back and say, too many new things in one piece. I think the consumer will accept new actions if they are getting something big in return. That's the magic equation. You can have them learn new behaviors, but you have to deliver to them something that's worth them learning a new behavior.
We knew there was work to be done to get consumers on board. And so in early 2015, the sale of new units was paused and the Explorer program was wound down. The technology and expertise X had built up graduated to Google to explore what the next steps should be. The Explorer program had highlighted just how useful Glass could be in bespoke situations. In particular, businesses told us they could use Glass to assist their employees with various tasks. There are many situations in the workplace where we want information, but digging it out of our current devices is disruptive or inconvenient. For many workers, nurses, construction workers, factory workers, it's not unusual to wear something to get their job done, so this wouldn't be a big behavioral shift for them to wear something like Glass. However, at the time the Explorer program wound down, Google wasn't ready yet to pivot Glass into a new use case. But by 2018, this had changed. X was ready to have another go at launching Glass.
And just said like, hey, is this still viable? Could it work? Could we have partners who show up, even do pre-sales if we actually built something?
This is Ivo Stavorik, a VP here at X and our resident lieutenant troublemaker.
So we went on just like what we do. Like we went out and started talking to those other people, those prosumers.
This is like doctors and nurses in a hospital.
Doctors, people who are out in industrial facilities, people who are doing maintenance manufacturing again, right? Because I knew the magic of that from my past.
Ivo had come from a background of making wearable tech, including something that worked in a similar way to glass all the way back in the 1990s, which had been built for manufacturing and inspection. He too could see the potential of glass beyond general consumers. Ivo spent a few weeks talking to partners, potential users, the AR and VR teams at Google, the data center team at Google, the hardware team at Google.
But once we got those alignments, we came up with a plan that in 11 months, we could go from chip up to full production and customers.
With V2 of glass.
Yeah. And you know what? In all my time delivering products to the world, I've never done something that fast. It was a very small team, very scrappy. We used some outside people who brought some expertise from, Apple and Intel and other places, companies I had worked with before too, where they had come in, they knew the wearable space. We had a team here, the Geckos, who had amazing capabilities that we were able to tap.
Remember the Geckos from episode 7? They're a small, crack team of specialist, low-volume manufacturing engineers led by Jacques Gagné.
Those guys can do stuff small as a screen that you put in a contact lens, all the way to building robots that go out into the field. It was just such a scrappy team, but this virtual army that was so capable.
You built up the team, you built up the product, you got the pre-sales. It had at least the opportunity to start paying for itself in the not too distant future. Then what happened?
Yeah, so I was getting excited. I was like, oh, this thing's got legs. We could actually turn this into a business pretty fast. And then lo and behold, Google called us back and said, can we have it back?
That's the thing with X. We are explorers. We don't scale finished products. Once something is ready to go, even if we're super excited about it and want to keep working on it, we have to let it go. It made sense for Google to bring Glass 2.0 or Glass Enterprise into its AR and VR development teams.
We're here as part of a larger team and a larger group, and they had a strong position and new things coming out of the space and thought this could be a good timing now that we've kind of turned it around in some way.
Google Glass Enterprise Edition was launched in 2019, specifically aimed at business and enterprise, and it did pretty well. Back in 2012, the average consumer hadn't been ready for this kind of wearable, but there were people ready to use it to do their work.
The interesting thing over multiple years, or even a decade now, people have not actually replicated glass the way we all made glass happen. There is still something special about that way that was packaged, put together, software, etc., that other people who have played in the space have just not replicated. And I think people are starting other attempts now. And I think what people would have done is that they've taken cues from Glass 1.0 and 2.0 and probably the way we did the Explorer series.
I still believe the Explorer project for Google Glass is one of the most interesting and incisive things we've ever done at X. It gave us more information about the product than any amount of market research could have. And through our experience with glass, we learned some really important lessons. One was about timing. Glass was just too early. More groundwork was needed before the consumer market would accept something like glass. Another is being really clear with both ourselves and potential users who a wearable device is for: the general consumer or a business market, early adopters or everyone. Lessons that we had very much in mind all the way through the development of this next moonshot.
I never thought I would work at a big tech company.
This is Jason Rugolo, and he's a self-starter, a perfect fit for our innovation lab.
Literally, I started my first company when I was 14.
He was making canvas panels for his uncle, an artist.
And one thing led to another. My aunt got involved, and we started making these canvas panels and selling them to him and selling them to his friends and then friends of friends. And I think, that was when I was 14. By the time I was 19, we made 30,000 canvas panels that year, roughly selling them for $10 a piece or something like that. So it was a nice little business. In fact, my aunt and uncle ran that business for 25 years or something and sold it. I, of course, went on to physics and all this other kind of stuff.
You churned through ideas maybe faster than anybody who has ever been here at X.
Yeah.
I remember once you came and
with a totally straight face, said, what if people didn't have to breathe or eat? Like, what if we could just like replace that?
Nuclear humans. Do we have to eat? Like, what is eating about, you know? And you think about that for only a few days, and you're just like, oh, well, our bodies are these little energy machines that need energy to live. It's like, are there other ways to do energy? What if we put in some kind of nuclear battery and we just closed looped this thing, you know? We just made a like closed cycle of molecules in our body.
So I think that idea didn't last more than a day or two.
Yeah. Maybe three.
Maybe three.
Embarrassing third day.
That is exactly the kind of question that should be happening here.
Yeah.
Now, our goal here at X is to be the right amount too early.
Yeah.
Right? Because if we're too early, which, you know, maybe arguably we were with something like glass, then we sort of miss the wave.
Right.
But if we're not too early enough, other people are doing it, and like
Yeah.
we just don't have the situation here where we're going to win in a sort of even race.
Right. Yeah.
Right. So we need to be the right amount too early so we're ahead once
Yeah.
it becomes obvious that something's important, but then not so early that we then just have to sit on our hands for a decade.
Yeah. I think that the thing that's so interesting about that earliest stage here is that it's so open to the crazy that you actually have the possibility of being early at all.
Back in 2017, soon after he started at X, Jason read a paper published by the Google Brain team, who you met in episode 3, that made him realize something big was coming. AI capabilities were advancing and fast.
It's like, oh, like these things are smart. Is this the time that finally we're going to have natural language computing like sci-fi has wanted to for 100 years? You know, it's like, is this happening?
With natural language computing becoming a reality, Jason saw an opportunity opening up. This new technology could make a new wearable computer so useful that people would change their behavior. He got to work right away so he could be the right amount too early.
And I very quickly went through essentially like every human machine interface you could imagine. Think like brooches, necklaces, like any kind of device that you could imagine talking to a computer. And I very quickly realized like nobody likes speakerphone. Like this is going to have to be an ear-worn kind of audio device. But the first thing that goes wrong when you try to wear something on your ears is it screws up your sense of hearing. And so if we're going to imagine a new kind of natural language human-computer interaction, and we believe that that's going to happen with an audio wearable or something you wear in your ear, first you got to solve for like, is that even possible?
Possible to not screw up our current experience of hearing.
Yeah.
While making it better in lots of ways.
Yeah, it's just like glass, where the idea is that you're going to have this visual computer that you're wearing on your head. It's like if that obstructed your vision, you wouldn't wear it. You know, you couldn't see. And of course, closed VR is something that you can do at your desk and you can just sit there in some virtual world, but that's not going to allow you to be in the real world.
And we've seen how much that's taken off.
Yeah, exactly.
Over and over again.
Yeah.
It hasn't.
Yeah, the 20 times it's been tried in the last 30 years.
And so Jason had a problem. There are plenty of smart audio devices on the market, and many of them are noise canceling. They block out the outside world to some extent. But we use our sense of hearing to make sense of the world in really subtle ways. Our brain can detect tiny time delays and the difference in volume between the right ear and left ear. This helps us to understand the direction a sound is coming from, how far away it is, the size of the space you're in, whether the source of the sound is moving, and how fast. And it all happens in milliseconds. Messing with that can be really confusing for your brain.
Our sense of hearing is so important to us that the idea of obstructing it with anything it's almost like nerve-wracking. You know, you feel like uncomfortable if you're walking around with something that's blocking your hearing.
And then, of course, there's the issue that Glass came up against: style and self-expression. How to make wearables that people actually want to wear. Could they design something worth wearing all day? Because even if it's comfortable, which Glass was, if it in any way undermines other people's perception of you when you wear it, it's just going to stay on the nightstand.
You know, we sit at our desks in our open office plan and we're wearing something on our ears. It almost becomes like a signal. It's like, don't talk to me. I'm in a different world right now. You know, and of course, that's not going to work if we're imagining that the future of computing is is walking around with an audio wearable. It's like it has to be something that actually connects you to the world more and is a signal to other people that you're more engaged. And so all these concepts that we started with, it's like, well, could we make a device that's wearable all the time that makes you hear better? That's like actually a sign that you're interested in talking to people? Like, that was a really interesting question because it goes to this idea of wearability.
So that was the task. As you'll know if you've listened to other episodes in the podcast, what we do here is start with the hardest thing first. And so that's what Jason's team did. Codenamed Wolverine, they needed to work out how to design a physical device that stops sound before it enters the ear and a tiny computer running AI to feed in just the salient sound information. We called it machine-mediated sound.
You know, you're wearing a device on your ears. It looks like a headphone. But what's happening is there are microphones facing outwards, and the microphones are sensing the world around you. You're not hearing the world around you. And all of that microphone data is then going into this computer that's in this device. And that computer is running a bunch of software programs. Think of them like apps. And it's manipulating the sound and deciding what audio to give to your ears. If you think of this as a magical layer, kind of modifying your local sound, your local acoustic scene, you say, well, what might I want to do, right? And then we can talk about what's possible. Well, I think everybody's had this experience of having difficulty hearing something that they want to hear. You know, you go to a restaurant in San Francisco and it's fashionable and interior design to have concrete floors and glass walls. And of course, that's the most reverberant, annoying acoustic environment that you could design. And then you have this like war of voices where everyone's trying to hear each other. So you go a little louder and then everyone goes a little bit louder and it just becomes this total cacophony. It's like, well, if I was at dinner, let's say I was on a date and I wanted to hear the person I was eating with, I would love to turn all that down. I'd love to not
Everyone's voice but hers.
That's right. Exactly. And so you could say if I had this, device on my ears, like, could I tell it to block out all the sounds except for hers? So we had a much more intimate gathering. So that we call like a super hearing app. That was something that we built very early on here.
At X, yeah.
At X. I remember I gave it to you.
I still have that.
You still have that?
I do.
Oh, I love that. It took us 6 months to build it. Yeah. It was a huge pain in the ass. But then once we had it, we wrote that app in 2 weeks. So it's like software goes a lot faster once you have the right hardware.
I remember this as the aha moment of this moonshot. I was asked to put into my ears a pair of early machine-mediated hearing devices. There were 2 people right in front of me, in real life, not recording on a screen, just real people, reading aloud from Alice in Wonderland.
Alice was beginning to get very tired of sitting by her sister on the bank. And having nothing.
I was handed a dial that I could turn back and forth. I turned it to the left, and one of the voices faded away.
Actually took a watch out of its waistcoat pocket and looked at it, and then hurried on. Alice started to her feet.
It literally turned down the voice of one of the people. I turned it the other way, and the other person went silent.
Nor did Alice think it so very much out of the way to hear the rabbit say to itself, "Oh dear, I shall be too late."
Oh, that was like crazy.
Oh, yeah. My God.
We called that the BFK, the big knob. And the experiment was, okay, we want to be able to control your environment. And we know that human voices are one of the most important things that we listen to. So we're like, okay, let's do human voices. And then we thought in typical X fashion, what would be the hardest possible thing to do? And it's like, well, if you had 2 speakers who were talking at the same time, so fully jamming each other, it's like, can you separate their voices from each other? This was the hardest version of that problem. And this was a machine learning problem. Not only did you have to separate their voices, but because they're standing right in front of you, you had to do it in real time. So there's no time to take the audio, do a Fourier transform into frequency space so you can use all these other techniques. No time for that. We had to do it in the time domain, super fast, streaming machine learning.
Tens of milliseconds.
Tens of milliseconds. Yeah, I think that one, if I recall correctly, I think was running at 30 milliseconds.
It has to be that fast because any slower and you'll notice the delay.
And it really is a magical feeling where it's a little eerie, where you're like, wait, I can control like what I'm hearing. Like, you don't believe your eyes, because your ears are hearing.
Remember the silent movies?
Yeah.
It felt like that, where it just felt like I could see his mouth moving. I heard him just a second ago. I think he's still talking, but I can't hear him saying anything. That's really weird.
Yeah. That's when we really believed that this idea of machine mediation of sound was possible.
Now that they knew it was possible, the next steps were to make it wearable, make it comfortable.
We decided on the wearability front not to try to hide it. We realized that the challenge of making something hidden in the canal or putting it behind the ear was so high that we should lean into creating so much value that you don't need to hide it, sort of like eyeglasses. We don't try to hide our glasses, we stylize them, even though they're large and on our face. It's like, well, let's enter that world. We'll create so much value that we don't have to hide it.
The final design is a custom fit earpiece that fits into the ear canal. The computing and circular array of microphones are in a disc about 4 centimeters in diameter that sits outside the ear. It looks kind of like wearing a silver dollar flat up against your ear. With the machine-mediated sound and the design in place, the team turned to what else this device could do. And I think this one could be truly transformational. Translation.
I show up in a place and there are a billion people that I can't talk to. And I would love to be able to connect with those people. Language and not understanding other languages is still the biggest barrier globally to people creating connections. And so imagine I show up with these silver dollars on my ear, this new really smart wearable, and someone is speaking a different language. Rather than have them talk into my phone and use Google Translate and read, and then I talk into my phone and I hold my phone up so that they can read what I said in their language. Wouldn't it be nice if I could just look at them like I'm talking to a person, and their voice and their natural language goes into my device, and my device just takes it and puts it in my native language.
So this is basically Babelfish from Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, a little thing you can just stick in your ear, and now you basically can hear naturally, and the language barriers just disappear.
Just gone, in fact, we call it Babel, the app, B-A-B-L, and this is one that we're going to launch the device with. It's actually not that hard to do once you have that first app that we just talked about, the Super Hearing app. One of the challenges of doing translation is just picking the right target speaker. It's like, who are you trying to translate? Let's say I'm in a public place and there's 10 people talking. Like, I have to isolate that person's voice before I put it into the translator. So we've had translation engines for a long time, but without this kind of like mixed reality audio device that can capture what you're trying to pay attention to and then deliver it to you in a way that sounds natural, you can't really do an app like that.
I'm just going to play devil's advocate for a second. So I'm an investor now.
Yeah.
Man, is this worth it? Couldn't I just make a brooch or something and park it near someone's mouth?
Yeah.
They can still talk to their computer, and they could have a little speaker on it where it's like, no, go left, go right, or her name is Sarah, idiot, or whatever.
Yeah. So this is a really good question because it goes back to what we were talking about at the start. It's like, the idea at X is to just try a lot of things and try them really fast, and just be like super dispassionate about it. It's like, nope, like I know that's your favorite idea right now, Jason, but like it's bad. Yeah, kill it and move on. It's like, how can the venture world invest hundreds of millions of dollars in something if it's not a good idea? And basically the psychology goes something like this. It's like, I have this idea. I'm really passionate about it. I think it's super interesting. I convince some other people it's super interesting who might be important people. They give me $10 million. And then you build some stuff, you make a better story, you have glossier presentations, you build some more stuff, you hire some people who are very important and very good. And then the story gets bigger. And then you get $50 million. And then you keep going. There's a lot of social momentum behind these technology concepts that can kind of keep them going until you launch the thing. And then if the original idea was not right, regular people are like, wah, wah, like this sucks, I don't want it, Well, the thing that I realized by building these devices very quickly and just trying them, I mean, these were ugly, like wires hanging out, just like concepts, well, they weren't very polished things. But the thing that you realize about a brooch or a watch or something in this category of a wearable natural language interface. It's like people don't like speakerphone. And so if you have like a hot mic somewhere on your body, you feel like it's listening to you and your conversations all the time. And if you have a speaker that's speaking out loud such that anyone around you can hear it, including you, so you can talk to it, it's kind of rude. It's like other people can hear what you're doing. And if you now extrapolate that to this vision for the future we have, there's this issue of privacy, both on the input, the way that you talk to it, and then also on the output, what it's saying to you. We do the voice pickup inside your ear canal. Inside your ear canal, your voice sounds really weird. It kind of sounds muffled like this. But the AIs don't care what your voice sounds like as long as the word error rate is really small and it understands you. So like I might forget when World War II started. So I want to like ask the AI, but I'm embarrassed because you're like, how do you not know when World War II started? And so I kind of say under my breath, it's like, hey, when did World War II start again? And then it tells me, if that was, let's say, a wearable somewhere else in my body, and it's like, World War II started in it's kind of embarrassing. I'm like, oh man, now everyone can hear what I'm talking to my computer about. But if it just says it, whispers it in my ear, it's fine, And so you learn that stuff when you try a lot of things.
So jump us forward a few years. You'd assembled this early team.
Yep.
You spun out from X and landed as an independent company on the outside, which is called IO.
Mm-hmm.
And you've been out for about 3 years now?
Yeah.
So where are you now? And like, what can people kind of expect? They can get this next year with all these superpowers? Is it going to be 6 months? Is it going to be 6 years? Like
much closer to 6 months. Yeah. So we're launching. So we have a Wi-Fi only version and then we have a Wi-Fi and LTE version. So LTE is like your cellular connection, like with your watch or your phone. The Wi-Fi we're targeting August or September. The LTE version will come out after. We were designing for this very smart natural language interface from the beginning. We knew we had to do this voice pickup very well and privately. We knew we had to invest heavily in wearability. That's why we custom fit these devices. This is for tech early adopters, for audiophiles, for AI enthusiasts. We've invested a lot in making, I think, the best sounding audio device that's ever been made. It's just a wonderful experience.
If you can't tell, I'm pretty excited about IO. I think it will live up to the hope I had for Glass of merging my digital life with my physical life. 11 years on from Glass's launch, and people are a whole lot more comfortable with this kind of technology in their lives. Talking to AI agents through our smart speakers and watches and headphones is becoming second nature. So while what IO does is different, it's also familiar enough. Familiar in a way that Glass just wasn't. Time will tell, but I think with IO, we're just the right amount too early. And while IO is just on the cusp of releasing a finished product, not a learning platform, it's also, at least for now, a device with early adopters and tech lovers in mind. We've talked about a few lessons learned from making Google Glass and IO, but I wanted to know from Jason too what he felt was the most important thing for someone wanting to take a moonshot to know.
One of the things that's really hard is to just put yourself out there because everybody's worried about looking stupid. And so finding the courage to, I don't know, let's take nuclear humans, for example. That was a terrible idea. Like, it doesn't make any sense. The first time I mentioned it to you, Astro, you were like, this huge smile on your face. You're like, damn, I've never heard anything like that.
Exactly.
Like, this is amazing. Of course, you had like 20 reasons why it was going to fail, which is, I think, really helpful, but there's no judgment about the experience of trying to come up with new things. And so, if I was talking to a new person that was struggling to get outside of all of the tech solutioning that they've heard about before, the stuff that, let's say, is the well-trodden path of technology and the future of technology, I'd say, like dig deep and just like have the fortitude to put yourself out there and try new things.
And if they can forget their inhibitions and access those unique ideas, it opens up so many possibilities.
What a remarkable moment, because we humans have been, I believe, operating more like machines in terms of efficiency and productivity, and the machines are here now. And so what an incredible time to exercise what only humans can do, which is imagination that comes from each of our own personal context. And so this is the opportunity to use those skills of dreaming together and imagining together the world that we want to step into.
You've been listening to the Moonshot Podcast, a Blanchard House production for X, the Moonshot Factory. I'm Astro Teller, and you can also find us on YouTube at X, the Moonshot Factory. Next time on the Moonshot Podcast, we're wrapping up the series with something a little different. We took the show on the road live to the legendary South by Southwest Festival in Austin for a special on-stage conversation about what it really takes to chase wild ideas through to reality. I was joined by three of my favorite people to talk about this stuff with: Adam Savage, maker, tester, and mythbuster extraordinaire; Katie Kwan, our favorite robot choreographer; and Nicholas Thompson, CEO of The Atlantic, as our moderator. It was a blast, wide-ranging, the best kind of unpredictable. That's next time on the Moonshot Podcast.